Hey everyone, it's Sava and my friend Niall, and we are back with another podcast. Today we are focusing on Nietzsche and his idea of the Übermensch or the overperson.
In our last podcast, we kind of touched upon the topic of the single individual as described by Kierkegaard. And I think in general, you'll see a lot of similarities in some of their arguments and some of their beliefs. And we do want to tackle some of those similarities and also some of those differences during this podcast.
Nietzsche most famously introduces the idea of the overperson in his book Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And he introduces this idea as a response to his saying God is dead. Now, when he says God is dead, he's not talking about like the literal deity, literally God dying, but rather he's pointing out that traditional values or other like main values that are honored in Christianity are losing their power to guide people's lives in modern times. And with this, I guess, decreasing power that religion has in people's lives, Nietzsche saw a like drift towards nihilism, which is the belief that life has no meaning or purpose.
Okay, so ultimately, like his connection with nihilism wasn't in the apathetic or simplistic sense, but more so a deeper phenomenon that kind of arose from the death of a god, or at least the decline in religious belief. So I think that he believed that natural and or like traditional values, particularly like those rooted in like Christian morality, had begun to lose their credibility and power over time. And as these values crumbled, a void was kind of left in the like hearts and minds of all the people who practice Christianity. So I guess like him and his connection with nihilism just comes from the experience of the world losing its kind of purpose and leaving humanity without a clear direction or justification for existence, which I guess, as you pointed out, is kind of what rose the idea of the overperson as a way to combat this void.
So, in a world full of like algorithm driven distractions and just a lot of social media, and honestly living a lot of your life online, I feel like more people often feel adrift and disconnected from any real sense of meaning of life if you're so involved with technology. And so basically, the overperson is Nietzsche's answer to this crisis. The overperson is basically this human being who overcomes this feeling of nihilism and creates their own meaning in a seemingly meaningless world. So, this podcast is really for anyone who's tired of living passively, tired of going through the same meaningless routine every day, and wants to take ownership of their life.
I believe the idea of the overperson would appeal most to those who kind of feel lost and want to search for a meaning when traditional sources of meaning, right, the societal norms, the inherited values, and or even their religion, no longer provides a sense of direction or purpose, right? Individuals can feel adrift and kind of lost in this void, as we mentioned earlier. And I think this concept of the overperson, that person who creates his own values, can be very appealing to those, as it kind of suggests a path to forging personal meaning in a seemingly like meaningless world, right? As kind of thought through the idea of nihilism.
Okay, now you guys may be thinking, like, why should we listen to us? But in our class, we talked about a variety of philosophers and all of their opinions on Christianity and religion. And we really think that Nietzsche and his idea of the overperson is really intriguing and honestly was one of the most prominent ideas that we got out of the class and something that we would actually partake in later in life after the course ended.
Yeah, I agree. As you mentioned kind of earlier, living in this world of like social media technology, it can kind of feel somewhat meaningless at times, right? This endless doom scrolling or endless scrolling that we all, sometimes do in our free time, right? This kind of idea of this over person who kind of rejects the societal norms, right? Tries to find meaning in a somewhat meaningless world. I think that is a very intriguing topic, and I think one person who can, a person that can like really encapsulate that idea can feel, I feel, much more fulfilled.
So, the main questions that we'll be going over in this podcast is what does it mean to be an overperson? And why is it important to become an overperson? Then we're also going to talk about how can it be misunderstood and what exactly you need to do to become this overperson. So the term Übermensch literally means overhuman. And this doesn't mean like a superhuman in that sense, but rather someone who has gone beyond what a human typically is. And Nietzsche likes to call this self overcoming. And basically, some basic ideas of this self overcoming is to challenge and transcend the crowd's mentality. And if you don't remember what the crowd mentality is from last time, it's basically what any idea that the majority believes in. Something that people usually just go along with, or an idea that people usually take on for themselves just because many other people agree with that idea. But during this journey of becoming an overperson, you don't want to take up those ideas. And another basic idea of becoming an overperson is confronting and really thinking about your own internalized values. You want to think about, like, where are these ideas and values that I'm believing in coming from? Are they coming from my religion or my family or the people around me? Are these ideas really ideas that I believe in? And do they actually help me live my life to the fullest? Or are they just ideas I've taken to be true because everyone around me has? Nietzsche writes, "You must become the person you are," which at first kind of makes no sense. Like, of course, you are the person you are. But he's implying that as a normal human, someone who's not an overhuman, isn't their real self yet, isn't their authentic self.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like we aren't naturally our authentic selves, right? Like the environment we're in, the people we're around kind of push us to act or like envision the world in a certain way. So I think being this over person is kind of a push to being your true natural self. So I think there is value in like going along that path, right? You find who you truly are, right? You're not burdened by the societal expectations to kind of act a certain way, to look at the world through a certain lens. So yeah, I think being an Ubermensch is like it's maybe not an easy goal, but I think it's a goal that pushes everyone to be again who they truly are.
I also think that Nietzsche's idea of the overperson is someone whose life isn't driven by purely survival or only trying to be happy at all times, but rather is trying to grow throughout their life.
Mm.
The overperson is also someone who takes action. They aren't passive and they don't react to things that happen in their life, but they take risks and make changes in their lives. One important aspect of this is when like unfortunate events happen in your life that you can't really control. And rather than, I guess, being sad about it and reacting to this event, you want your mindset to be, yes, this event happened and I'm glad it happened, and then make something out of it. Try to twist this unfortunate event to your advantage and really just own it.
Yeah, so I guess the idea of owning it, right? Taking responsibility, right? By willing their experiences, like the over person takes complete responsibility for their own life. And they don't see themselves as victims of circumstance, but more so like active participants in shaping and like creating and aligning their own destiny, even if it includes challenges or suffering or even like random occurrences. I could perhaps like recollect a certain instance of kind of this happening. I guess my first thought would be perhaps a course I've taken in my previous semesters at Princeton, right? Maybe I didn't get the most desirable grade I wanted, but looking back I'm still trying to apply this kind of idea to my own life and my past experiences. But I guess the first experience that kind of comes to mind was a few months ago on a plane ride back home from Princeton. Um, I it was pretty bad weather, and I had the unlucky circumstance of having my flight canceled and all remaining flights for kind of the rest of the day. So I had to stay at the airport overnight, which, looking back, some people might think of as a really kind of bad, improbable circumstance to be in. But I kind of made the best of that situation looking back. I met somebody at the airport who also went to Princeton and that I haven't met on campus before. So I kind of used that time to get along with the person, right? And me and him are still close friends to this day after meeting in a very random kind of situation that some might see as kind of a challenge. But looking back, right, I took kind of ownership of that, right? Instead of kind of just wallowing in sadness, I took responsibility for the situation and I tried to turn it around to be something positive that had a positive effect on me in the future. So meeting that person was kind of my attempt at kind of taking responsibility of the moment and going through challenges and sufferings and a seemingly kind of random occurrence. Okay, so I guess now we've tackled like what it means to be an over person, an Ubermensch. So Sava, what do you possibly think is the reason one might strive to become one?
Yeah, so apart from escaping the nihilism that may be spreading throughout the world or spreading through your mind, I think another important aspect of becoming an overperson is that, like, if you don't create your own values, someone else's values will control you. And if you're only living one life, there's no point in living a duplicate of someone else's life. There's no point in taking up other people's values and pretending they're your own. I think it's important to use the one life that you have to make an impact being yourself with your own true values. Additionally, becoming an overperson kind of helps you deal with the unfortunate things that may happen in your life. And I'm not saying that once you become an overperson or on your journey to becoming an overperson that you won't suffer, but rather this lifestyle gives you a way to turn unfortunate events around and turn them into something that you can create something good out of. Like Niall's example of making a new friend from an unfortunate circumstance.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the idea of like what really is an Ubermensch, and I would say it's someone that says yes to life, and that includes its sufferings and its obstacles, and and also like the good portions as well. It's not just accepting the pain, but also loving it as necessary for improvement and greatness in the future. So I think life inevitably brings challenges and difficulties, and the other person's love of faith offers a way to kind of go beyond resentment and try to find strength and even growth in challenge and adversity. And I think this is an important concept that can really resonate with those who are tired of fighting against reality and seek a more profound and accepting relationship with their own existence and experiences. Also, the kind of reshaping of these experiences allows an over person to not simply be a recipient of existing values, but also an active creator of them. And this shift from passive observer and acceptor to a more active role is important in kind of shaping one's world and one's own moral compass, and it can be very empowering and fulfilling for those who seek it. And I'd also like to say like this strive for self-control and the ability to kind of direct your own life is a very important thing in the pursuit of autonomy and inner strength, and can be a really attractive like overall existence for someone who feels pretty constrained by these external forces and society as a whole, whether it be religion as well, and all these maybe external weaknesses. Okay, so we've tackled the idea of what an overperson is and why someone might kind of strive to become one. So, Sava, what do you think are some common, either some pitfalls or some misunderstandings of what makes an overperson and what it is?
Yeah, there's a few misunderstandings that I would like to go over. One of them is confusing rebellion with originality. And as I had said before, like, don't just follow along with the crowd. Yes, that's true, but just rejecting those norms isn't enough. You don't just want to reject the ideas of the crowd and, I guess, have no values to replace them. You want to make sure you can build something better. It's less about saying no and rejecting other people's ideas and values, but finding and saying yes to your own truths and your own values inside of you.
A common kind of misunderstanding that I want to kind of tackle is the idea of like that being an over person, right? Becoming this overcoming individual means that you have to literally be over people, right? In an egotistical sort of dominance way. And I think this is like kind of a misinterpretation of what Nietzsche is kind of going at. I think some people might read his works and kind of not understand some of the nuance in his wording. I think Nietzsche's like famous like critique over conventional morality, particularly more like Christian ethics, which in and of itself kind of emphasizes self-sacrifice and like the greater good, right? Like altruism, and I think his critique in that can be seen or kind of misconstrued as like a whole kind of rejection over the concerns of others and kind of only thinking about yourself. But kind of my view of his work is kind of the core of the Ubermensch. This idea of the overperson is overcoming of one's self, one's own weaknesses, limitation, and one's own like adherence to outdated and old values. I think it's an internal struggle for self mastery, not mastery over others, and the creation of one's own values, and not necessarily dominating other people. My vision is that the over person doesn't live in a kind of a moral vacuum, right, devoid of all ethics, right? They create their own values, ones that are rooted in more life affirming perspectives. These values could include, right, compassion, creativity, and fostering kind of the excellence of others, right? I think it's up to one's self to decide that. And I think the key is that these values are not being opposed by some external source, but are more born through, personal experience and personal overcoming of said experiences.
Yeah, so the final misunderstanding that I wanted to talk about was thinking that the overperson is like a finished and perfect product that you can become once and for all. But this is kind of just wrong. You don't you're not on the journey to become an overperson and then once you reach that quality of becoming an overperson, you live life however you want. I see the overperson as more of a direction rather than a destination. It's about the process of overcoming and always striving and recreating yourself and your values.
And I think it's kind of natural for people to seek a definitive endpoint and like set clear achievements. And I think the idea of like a perfect person can be like very appealing to somebody. But I think you'd be misinterpreting the idea of overcoming as being a singular act rather than like an ongoing process, which is more in line of like what the idea Nietzsche described is. So I think it would be more accurate to kind of encapsulate Nietzsche's philosophy as as being rooted in this idea of becoming. And the Übermensch is not a being, but a becoming itself, which is like kind of a continuous process of self overcoming. It's more so about the journey of striving rather than reaching this like pinnacle of being a human being. I think it would be impossible to kind of live a life without struggle and challenges. So I don't think there is a final state of being where someone is like completely immune to these forces. And I think the Ubermensch doesn't really escape that struggle. It kind of just embraces it as an opportunity for even further overcoming, which I think is a more accurate way of kind of interpreting the text.
Now that we've covered a few things about being an overperson, let's talk about what exactly do you need to do to actually become one. Nietzsche himself actually proposes this thought experiment. You should ask yourself daily, would I live this day again for eternity? Exactly everything the same, your actions, your thoughts, everything's the same. And would you live this day every single day? And if you find yourself upset with the idea of that, change something. This idea can be extended to the rest of your life. If you died right now, what would you be sad about? Or if you had to live your entire life over and over again, what would you be sad about? You want to be able to accept and be grateful about every aspect of your life. So if there's something that you're upset about or not fully satisfied with, you should just change it. So every night after the day's over, reflect on your entire day. And if there's something you didn't like about it, do your best to not let it happen again, or either take the thing that happened and twist it into something you're glad that happened.
Kind of the next main step or instruction I want to kind of highlight is that you have to view pain more so as creative potential and ask yourself, right, what can you make from it and what strengths can be forged from it? I think in general, the path to becoming an overperson is not one of like ease or comfort. In fact, I think Nietzsche kind of believed that genuine growth and self overcoming really comes from confronting and mastering challenges, which also include pain, both physical and or emotional. Instead of recoiling from the suffering that you might encounter, an inspiring overperson learns to see it as kind of a transformative period that can kind of create immense strength and unlock potentially a creative vision. And I think the first step of doing so, the first step to kind of explore is that idea of shifting perspective, one that kind of challenges the victim mentality. And that first step is to actively resist seeing oneself as kind of a passive victim of pain. Instead, adopt a mindset of self agency, right? Like, what can I or you do with this experience? And I think reframing suffering as more information can allow pain to be a powerful kind of teacher in a sense, that's going to aid in your growth and your overcoming. And I think that leads to the idea of kind of the creative potential of pain, right? As first as an artistic expression, right? Um, and through philosophical insight that you might receive. So overall, like this main step kind of includes reflection, right? Like what is this pain teaching me? And what weakness is it exposing that I might potentially overcome? And I think once you've asked yourself those questions and reflected, you can really take action, right? Can I channel this pain into a creative project, right? Whether it be, through writing, art, music, and how can this experience kind of inform my values and guide my future actions? And if you look through a more so like long-term perspective, right, you might ask yourself, how can I look back on past pains I've experienced and see the ways in which it shaped me for the better, right? That goes along the idea of like reframing your past and asking yourself, right, how can I approach future challenges with the understandings that they hold for potential for growth? I think, yeah, the main idea with this step is just emphasizing the active and transformative relationship that you might have with pain and struggle.
And the last thing I want to suggest you all to do is each day try to deeply reflect on your actions and ask yourself, is this truly what I believe in and wanted to do, or is it someone else's thoughts and ideas in my mind? Then intentionally choose how to live based on your own reasoned principles. Try to notice when you're following trends or beliefs just to fit in. And especially when you're making a big decision, try to practice solitude and spend time alone to hear your own voice and thoughts, ensuring that you're following your own unique life path.
I think that wraps up all the main talking points we wanted to discuss. So thank you again for listening. I'm Niall,
This is Sava.
and we hope you have a nice journey, potentially adopting the ideas of the Ubermensch.